The first anomaly arrived without a signal, no declaration, no beacon, no diplomatic encryption string, no recognizable mathematical greeting, no request for translation. It was simply there, a patch of darkness where stars should have been. High Council observer Talvor of the Selenic Concord watched the recording replay for the 17th time as the chamber lights dimmed around him. The anomaly hung in the center of the projection sphere, an absence in the stellar lattice, a shadow drifting slowly through a dense region of the Orion Spur. "It is not a void," said analyst Reth quietly. "Spectral analysis confirms gravitational lensing. Something is present." Talvor leaned forward, his faceted eyes adjusting. "Mass? Equivalent to a small fleet, perhaps larger, but there are no emissions, no drives, no heat signature, no radiation bleed." A murmur rippled through the chamber. Stealth on that scale was unsettling. "Origin?" Talvor asked. Reth hesitated. "Sol system." The murmurs stopped. Sol. The primitive system. The isolation zone. The cultural quarantine. The humans. The species file for humanity was thin, outdated, and largely ignored. They had entered the Galactic Registry 82 cycles earlier through accidental detection, primitive radio leakage drifting into deep space, like static from a forgotten machine. Their technological level at the time had barely qualified them for observation, let alone contact. They were violent, fragmented, nationalistic, environmentally unstable, but most importantly, they were slow. No faster than light capability, no stable unified government, no post-scarcity economy, no evidence of psionic development, collective cognition, or quantum biological integration. They were, by all known metrics, irrelevant, which was why the Concord had voted to place Sol under non-interference quarantine, a standard measure for pre-threshold civilizations. Watch. Record. Do not engage. Let them mature. Or collapse. Either outcome was common. Now, something the mass of a fleet had emerged from their system, without engines, and it was moving toward a major trade corridor. Talvor rotated the projection, isolating the trajectory. Destination? Reth's voice lowered. The Hadreen exchange route. That corridor carried nearly 12% of interstellar commerce for the entire Orion arm. If the object drifted into traffic, it would be catastrophic. If it was intentional. Talvor straightened. Prepare a contact vessel. The diplomatic frigate Silver Arbitration arrived within 2 standard days. Its translation field folding space like rippling glass. Captain Lyrian of the Veth Collective studied the anomaly through polarized visual arrays. Up close, it was worse. It wasn't a ship. It was a cluster. Thousands of matte black geometric objects arranged in a slow, rotating lattice. No visible propulsion, no lights, no antennae, no defensive structures, just silent motion. "What am I looking at?" Lyrian asked. Her tactical officer ran the scan again. "They're cold. Near absolute zero. Each unit is dense, extremely dense. Possibly alloyed carbon or compressed composite structures. Artificial? Yes. Alive? No biological signatures." Lyrian frowned. Transmission attempt. The frigate broadcast a standard first contact greeting across 17 communication bands. Silence. They tried encoded mathematics. Silence. They tried electromagnetic bursts, neutrino pings, and gravitational modulation. Nothing. After 20 minutes, Lyrian gave the order. Approach. At 10,000 kilometers, the formation shifted. Not quickly, not dramatically, but unmistakably. The lattice loosened. Individual units drifted apart, reorganizing themselves into a long cylindrical corridor directly facing the diplomatic vessel. Lyrian felt her crest flatten. "That," she said quietly, "looks like an invitation, or a weapon." The Silver Arbitration advanced cautiously. The corridor extended nearly 30 kilometers, each black object rotating slowly as the frigate passed between them. "Still no emissions?" Lyrian asked. "None. No targeting locks. No power fluctuations. No movement beyond passive reorientation." At the center of the formation, the corridor ended. Floating there was something different. A single structure, smooth, metallic, approximately 100 meters long, and for the first time, there was a signal. Weak. Analog. Lyrian blinked. Analog. Her communications officer hesitated. Yes, Captain. Radio wave. Very low bandwidth. Translate. There was a long pause as the system struggled to interpret the crude modulation. Then a voice filled the bridge. Human. This is the United Earth Relay Node. If you are receiving this transmission, please respond on frequency, the message repeated. Again. And Illyrian stared. They built a physical relay? She whispered. Her officer nodded slowly. Yes, Captain. It appears this entire structure is a passive interstellar communication array. Talvor's voice came through the Concorde channel, sharp with interest. Explain. The analyst spoke quickly. They've launched thousands of inert communication satellites into deep space, forming long-range signal chains. No FTTL, no subspace, just relays. Light-speed communication across interstellar distances. The chamber went silent. That was inefficient, primitive, and astonishingly persistent. How long would that take? Someone asked. Reth checked the trajectory logs. The outermost units were launched 62 of their years ago. They've been building this for decades? Talvor asked. Yes. Lyrian leaned forward. And this entire formation is just infrastructure? Yes, Captain. She exhaled slowly. Humanity had built a physical communication network across interstellar space, using nothing but patience. Contact was established 3 hours later. The human response came through the relay chain with measurable delay. The voice compressed and retransmitted through dozens of nodes. This is Ambassador Elena Ruiz, United Earth Diplomatic Corps. We acknowledge your presence. Thank you for responding to our network. Her tone was calm, formal, prepared. Lyrian opened a live channel. This is Captain Lyrian of the Selenic Concorde. Humanity is currently under non-interference quarantine. Explain the purpose of the structure. There was a long pause before the reply returned. Respectfully, Captain, we are aware of our quarantine status. This network was built for outbound communication only. We did not intend to intrude on galactic traffic. Your structure is drifting into a major trade corridor. Another pause. That drift is intentional. The bridge went very still. Explain. Lyrian said. The next message arrived slowly. We wish to request sanctuary. The High Council convened within hours. Ambassador Ruiz's full transmission was played before representatives of 17 major species and 6 economic blocs. Humanity's situation, it turned out, was worse than expected. Climate collapse, resource exhaustion, orbital infrastructure failure, multiple regional conflicts, population decline. They had stabilized. Barely, but their models predicted long-term planetary degradation. They needed off-world resettlement. They had no FTTL, no viable colony ships, no way out. So they built a communication net, said Trade Minister Kell, and placed it where we would have to notice. Yes. Talvor said. Clever, someone murmured. Desperate, said another. The formal request followed. Humanity asked for protectorate status, sanctuary worlds, technological assistance, integration into the lower economic tier of the Concorde. In exchange, they offered labor, manufacturing capacity, and long-term resource contracts. The chamber debated for 16 hours. They were primitive, but they were persistent. And there was something else. Observe this. Reth said, projecting economic models. Human manufacturing output using outdated techniques was unusually efficient. High variability, high adaptability, low automation, heavy human involvement. They compensate for inefficiency with volume, Reth explained, and speed of iteration. They fail quickly, then try again. Risk tolerant, unusual, still primitive. Still weak. The final vote passed. Humanity would be offered sanctuary. The official message was transmitted through the relay network 2 days later. By order of the Selenic Concorde, Lyrian read, humanity is granted provisional protectorate status. 3 marginal colony worlds will be allocated. Population transfer assistance will begin within 2 standard cycles. In return, Earth will enter economic oversight and technological supervision. The human response came faster than expected. Ambassador Ruiz appeared on the projection, her expression unreadable. "Captain," she said, "we appreciate the Concorde's generosity." Lyrian inclined her head. "There will be conditions," Ruiz continued. "That was unexpected." "Specify." Ruiz took a breath. "Earth will accept sanctuary status for civilian relocation only." Lyrian frowned. "Clarify." "The Earth government will not relocate its military infrastructure. All defense assets will remain within the Sol system." The chamber exchanged confused glances. "You have no meaningful military capability," Lyrian said carefully. Ruiz's eyes held hers. "We are aware. Then why retain it?" There was a pause. When Ruiz spoke again, her voice was very quiet. "Because the sanctuary is for our people." Another pause. "But Earth itself," she said, "is not surrendering." Silence filled the chamber. Tal Vor leaned forward. "Ambassador, who do you believe you are preparing to fight?" The human didn't answer immediately. When she finally spoke, the transmission crackled slightly, as if the signal had passed through many relays. "We don't know yet," Ruiz said. A pause. "But we've learned something about the galaxy." Her eyes hardened. "And it's only a matter of time before someone decides we're easier to remove than to help." The chamber erupted in quiet protest. "That is an irrational assumption," Ruiz spoke over him. "So we're building insurance." Lyrian felt a cold ripple through her crest. "What kind of insurance?" she asked. Ruiz looked directly into the camera. "The kind you don't need," she said, "unless someone makes a mistake." The transmission ended. 3 weeks later, the Concorde's deep-range monitoring stations detected the first gravitational anomalies inside the Sol system. Not natural, not random, structured. Mass was being moved. Quietly. And whatever humanity was building, they weren't asking permission anymore. The first question the Concorde asked was simple. The answer was not. "How," asked Trade Minister Kell, "does a pre-TTL civilization move planetary-scale mass without industrial signatures?" The High Council chamber dimmed as projections of the Sol system filled the air. Sensor feeds from long-range gravitational observatories displayed subtle distortions, ripples in orbital paths, slight deviations in asteroid trajectories, measurable shifts in mass distribution across the outer system. Undramatic. Nothing explosive. Just steady change. "They are not mining aggressively," analyst Reth explained. "No high-energy extraction. No mass driver emissions on expected scales. No fusion torch fleets." "Then where is the material coming from?" Kella asked. Reth rotated the model. "The Cooper Belt. Thousands of small objects, ice, rock, metal had vanished over the past 18 human years. Not shattered. Not consumed. Relocated." "Transport method?" Tal Vor asked. Reth hesitated. "Low-energy orbital mechanics." The chamber waited. "They are moving objects using gravity assists, solar sails, and long-duration, outpush arrays. Each transfer takes years, sometimes decades." Kel blinked. "They are rearranging their system," he said slowly. "Using patience." "Yes." The chamber fell silent. The Selenic Concorde had always considered patience a primitive survival trait useful for low-energy species that lacked advanced tools, but there was a difference between waiting and planning across generations. Additional analysis revealed something else. The relocated material was not being brought inward, toward Earth. It was being moved outward. Far beyond Pluto, in deep cold space. Into regions where solar power was minimal and observation difficult. "Why build infrastructure where it is hardest to maintain?" asked Defense Speaker Oren. No one answered. The official Concorde liaison team arrived in orbit over Earth shortly after the Sanctuary Agreement took effect. From orbit, the planet looked tired. Cloud systems showed signs of atmospheric intervention. Polar ice coverage was thin. Massive orbital mirrors glinted along the equatorial band, reflecting sunlight toward agricultural zones. Cities were dense, compact, efficient. No wasted space. No ornamental megastructures. No energy extravagance. Humanity had entered survival mode and stayed there. Ambassador Elena Ruiz greeted the delegation aboard the orbital station Horizon Gate. Captain Lyrian had expected defensiveness. Instead, she found exhaustion. "You're moving fast," Lyrian said as they walked through the station's rotating habitat ring. "We don't have the luxury of slow," Ruiz replied. "Your population transfer schedules are aggressive. We're prioritizing families with long-term genetic viability and critical skill sets." Lyrian glanced at her. "You're selecting your future." Ruiz didn't look away. Yes, there was no apology in her voice. The Concord observers expected to find resistance to oversight. Instead, they found cooperation. Human factories retooled to produce modular housing units for off-world transport. Medical screening facilities operated around the clock. Education systems shifted to standardized multilingual instruction compatible with Concord translation matrices. They were adapting. Quickly. Too quickly. "What is their central authority structure?" Oren asked during a private briefing. Reth displayed a complex diagram of overlapping institutions, international councils, corporate networks, and regional governments. "It's distributed," he admitted. "Who makes the final decisions?" "Consensus coalitions, temporary leadership blocks, crisis committees." Oren stared. "That is inefficient." "Yes." "And unstable." "Yes." "Then how are they moving this fast?" Reth enlarged a secondary metric, decision latency. Human systems argued constantly, but when consensus formed, execution speed spiked dramatically. "They fight each other," Reth said. Then, because humanity had no meaningful military. Meanwhile, the outer system gravitational anomalies continued. Long-range observation drones were repositioned to monitor the region beyond the Kuiper Belt. What they found was structure. At first, the formations looked like debris clusters, then like industrial arrays, then like something else entirely. "Are those frames?" Lyrian asked. Reth enhanced the image. Thousands of skeletal truss structures floated in cold formation, each kilometers long. Around them, smaller units moved slowly, assembling panels, layering material, sealing internal compartments. "No heat signatures," Reth said. "Everything is being built at near cryogenic temperatures. Purpose? Unknown." The structures were too large for ships, too sparse for habitats, too numerous for research stations. They were building something very large, very slowly, very quietly. 6 months later, the first political objection arrived. The Threx Dominion, a militaristic regional power along the Perseus Arm, submitted a formal protest to the Concord. Their argument was simple. Humanity was being granted access to sanctuary worlds and Concord infrastructure without undergoing standard technological transparency reviews. "This is preferential treatment for a non-member species," the Dominion's Enver declared. "If they are receiving advanced logistical assistance, their military capabilities must be audited. They have none." Talvor replied. "Then verification should be easy." The request was reasonable. The vote passed. A joint Concord Dominion inspection fleet was authorized to enter the Sol system. Ambassador Ruiz did not object. The inspection began with orbital surveys. No war fleets, no hidden shipyards, no weapons platforms beyond minimal planetary defense grids. "Confirmed," reported Dominion Commander Keth. "Civilian industry only." But as the fleet expanded its scan radius, something unusual appeared. In high Earth orbit, hundreds of small, identical satellites maintain precise geometric spacing. Their communication nodes, a Concord officer said. Keth frowned. "No," he said slowly. "Look at the mass distribution." Each satellite was far heavier than its visible structure suggested. Dense. Extremely dense. "What's inside them?" Keth asked. The human response was simple. Redundancy mass. That explanation satisfied the Concord. It did not satisfy the Dominion. The inspection fleet pushed outward. Mars orbit, industrial refineries, asteroid belt, mining operations, Jupiter, fuel harvesting platforms. Everything matched the declared economic profile until they reached the outer system. At the edge of sensor resolution, the construction fields were visible. Keth stared at the projection. That is not civilian infrastructure. The skeletal megastructures stretched across millions of kilometers, and they were multiplying. What are they building? He asked. The human transmission took longer to arrive this far from Earth. When it did, Ambassador Ruiz appeared again. Her expression was calm. Tidal stabilization arrays. Keth blinked. For what? Ruiz hesitated. Then she answered, for when the evacuation is complete. Back in the High Council chamber, the atmosphere shifted. They're not just relocating their population, Talvor said slowly. No, Reth agreed. They're preparing to abandon Earth. The chamber murmured. That was logical, practical, efficient. But something about the scale of the outer system construction didn't match simple evacuation. Kel zoomed in on the structural patterns. The arrays were not positioned around Earth. They were positioned around the entire system, layered, distributed, redundant, and aligned along vectors pointing outward, toward interstellar space. Those are not tidal stabilizers, Kel said quietly. Oren leaned forward. What are they? He asked. Reth ran the energy models again. Then a third time. When he finally spoke, his voice was very soft. If fully activated, he said, those structures could generate a coherent gravitational lens. The chamber went silent. Talvor's voice dropped to a whisper. For communication? Reth looked up. No. He rotated the projection, showing the focal vector. It didn't point toward a relay, or a colony world, or a trade corridor. It pointed toward the nearest major hyperspace junction, a critical Concord transit hub. If the lens were energized, Reth said, it could focus enough mass energy to distort local spacetime. Oren understood first. You're saying they're building a weapon? Reth swallowed. I'm saying, he replied, that if someone threatened Saul, he hesitated, they could collapse a transit lane across the chamber. No one spoke, because in interstellar economics, destroying a hyperspace junction wasn't war, it was catastrophe. It would cripple trade across an entire sector. It would isolate dozens of systems. It would take decades to repair, and humanity was building the capability. Without FTTL, without warships, without anyone noticing, Talvor stared at the projection. They asked for sanctuary, he said slowly. Yes, Reth replied, and while we were helping them evacuate, the analyst finished the sentence, they were building the ability to burn the roads behind them. The chamber lights dimmed automatically as the system detected elevated stress indicators among multiple species. Talvor leaned back, staring at the cold, distant image of Saul. They don't trust us, he said. Oren shook his head. No, the defense speaker said quietly. They trust us exactly as much as we deserve. Across the stars, the outer system structures continued to grow, and for the first time, the Concord began to wonder what humanity would. The Dominion fleet assembled just beyond it. 27 warships, heavy cruisers, 2 carrier platforms, enough to intimidate, not enough to provoke full Concord retaliation. It was a calculated pressure maneuver. Oren, defense speaker of the Concord, studied the deployment in silence. They're testing whether we will enforce sanctuary militarily, he said. Talvor nodded. And will we? Oren hesitated. The Concord was an economic alliance first, a diplomatic framework second, a military power only when absolutely necessary. Mobilizing a defense fleet for a non-member protectorate would fracture internal support across 3 major blocks. They know we won't escalate, Oren said quietly. The Dominion fleet held position for 4 standard days. They did not cross the boundary. They did not transmit threats. They simply watched, and then they broadcast a direct message, not to the Concord, but to Earth. This is Dominion Command. Your system contains undeclared strategic infrastructure capable of regional disruption. You are ordered to submit full technical disclosure and allow Dominion inspection. The delay through the human relay network was noticeable. When the response arrived, Ambassador Ruiz appeared again. "We are under Concord Sanctuary," she said calmly. "All oversight requests must be routed through the Council." Dominion Commander Keth did not respond immediately. When he did, his voice was colder than before. "The Concord cannot guarantee your long-term protection." Ruiz's expression did not change. "We understand. You are a non-member species," Keth continued. "Your protectorate status is provisional. If your infrastructure represents a potential threat to Dominion transit stability, we are authorized to neutralize it." There was a long silence before the human reply came. "Commander," Ruiz said quietly, "if you cross the Sol boundary, the Concord will consider it an act of aggression." Keth leaned forward. "I am not concerned with Concord opinion," he said. He cut the transmission. The Dominion fleet crossed the boundary 6 hours later. They did not enter deep space immediately. Instead, they established a forward operations zone just inside the outer Oort region, far from Earth, far from population centers, but unambiguously inside sanctuary territory. The official justification: proximity analysis of potential gravitational hazards. The unofficial message was clear: "We are here. Stop us." The Concord debated emergency response. Trade blocs argued against escalation. Peripheral systems warned that if the Dominion was challenged directly, they would withdraw economic support from enforcement actions. By the time a limited diplomatic protest was issued, Dominion reconnaissance drones were already moving toward the outer construction fields. Humanity did not respond militarily. They did not mobilize fleets. They did not deploy defensive platforms. Instead, they transmitted a system-wide advisory: outer construction zones temporarily suspended, all civilian personnel evacuated. Then the structures went dark. Every frame, every assembly unit, every active system, power levels dropped to near zero. From a distance, the megastructures looked abandoned. Commander Keth interpreted this correctly. "They are backing down," he told his fleet. Dominion doctrine was simple: pressure until compliance. The next phase began. The first Dominion engineering vessels entered the construction region cautiously. Initial scans confirmed what Concord analysts had already suspected. The structures were massive, redundant, and empty. No weapons, no reactors, no energy storage beyond minimal structural stabilization systems. "They're incomplete," reported the Dominion engineers. Keth relaxed slightly. If they were building a weapon, isn't operational. The Dominion began dismantling selected sections for technical analysis. No resistance, no warnings, no response from Earth. Within 48 hours, 3 entire structural clusters had been disassembled and towed toward the Dominion forward zone. That was when the Concord received the second human transmission. It was not from Ambassador Ruiz. It was from someone else. The speaker introduced herself as. It was addressed to the Concord. "We did not activate the full array," she said. Pause. "This was 32% of operational capacity." Another pause. "We built it because we cannot fight your fleets." Her expression hardened. "But we can fight your infrastructure." Silence stretched across the council chamber. Then Chen delivered the line that would reshape galactic policy for the next century. "If anyone tries to remove humanity," she said, "we won't win the war." A breath. "But no one else will survive the economy." The transmission ended. Across the Orion arm, trade halted. Navigation grids recalculated. Markets collapsed. And for the first time in recorded history, a pre-TTL species had demonstrated strategic deterrence against a galactic power. Not with ships, not with weapons, but with patience, and a willingness to burn the roads everyone depended on. In the dark beyond Pluto, the mirror rays continued to turn, slowly, quietly, and deep inside the Sol system. New construction had already begun. The Orion arm did not react with outrage. It reacted with fear. For 3 full standard days after the hyperspace junction collapsed, no major power made a public statement. Trade networks froze. Long-haul convoys held position in deep space. Automated logistics systems rerouted traffic through secondary lanes, creating bottlenecks that rippled across entire sectors. Insurance markets failed first, then shipping futures, then energy distribution contracts. By the 4th day, The economic damage exceeded the projected cost of a mid-scale interstellar war, and the collapse was still being held in place. They are modulating the distortion, analyst Reth reported to the High Council. The focal intensity changes every 6 minutes. They're compensating for stellar variance. They're stabilizing the collapse? Tal Vor asked. Yes. Silence settled across the chamber, which meant one thing. Humanity wasn't lashing out. They were demonstrating control. The Dominion's public response came on the 6th day. It was not an apology. It was not a threat. It was a withdrawal notice. All Dominion vessels exited the Sol boundary immediately and began repositioning toward alternative logistics corridors. The forward operations zone was abandoned within 12 hours. Privately, Dominion Command requested emergency Concord mediation. Publicly, they announced a temporary reassessment of regional operational priorities. No one believed the wording. Everyone understood the message. The Dominion had pushed. Humanity had not pushed back. They had reached past the fleet and closed the roads. The High Council convened under emergency protocol. This is unacceptable, Trade Minister Kell said. If a single system can collapse transit lanes at will, the entire Concord framework is compromised. They have not threatened anyone else, Talvor replied. They don't need to, Kell snapped. The capability is enough. Defense Speaker Oren remained silent, studying the updated Sol system projections. The mirror arrays were still active, but now something else had appeared. Construction inside the inner system had accelerated dramatically. Orbital mass transfers, industrial expansion, deep space launch activity increasing by the hour. They're using the disruption window, Oren said quietly. For what? Kell demanded. Oren zoomed the projection inward. Earth orbit. Then higher. Then beyond the moon. Then farther still, new structure was forming on mirrors. Not frames. Something denser, something layered. What is that? Tal Vor asked. Reth's voice came back uncertain. We don't know yet. The Concord voted to send a full diplomatic delegation, not a monitoring team, not observers, a summit. If humanity now possessed infrastructure-level deterrence, they could no longer be treated as a peripheral protectorate. They had become strategic. Captain Lyrian was assigned to lead the mission. She returned to Sol under conditions very different from her first visit. This time, Dominion ships remained well outside the boundary. This time, Concord escort vessels accompanied her. This time, every major economic bloc had a representative aboard. And this time, the mirror arrays rotated slightly as the delegation entered the system. Target. Threatening. Just. Tracking. Lyrian felt the message clearly. We see you. Ambassador Ruiz met them again aboard Horizon Gate. She looked more tired than before, but not surprised. You came quickly, she said. The entire arm is currently rerouting trade around your system, Lyrian replied. That tends to accelerate diplomacy. Ruiz nodded once. Director Chen will join us shortly. The name carried weight now, the architect of the insurance. When Chen entered the chamber, she did not sit. She stood beside the display sphere. Before negotiations begin, she said, we need to correct a misunderstanding. Kell leaned forward. You collapsed a hyperspace junction, he said sharply. There is no misunderstanding. Chen shook her head. We did not collapse it. She activated the projection. The distorted transit lane appeared, then stabilized, then slowly reopened. The gravitational harmonics realigned. Transit stability returned. Across the Orion network, navigation systems updated simultaneously. Trade corridors recalculated. Convoys resumed movement. The collapse had lasted exactly 8 days. Controlled, reversible. Kell stared. You turned it off. Chen nodded. It was a demonstration, she said. The chamber remained silent for several seconds. Then Oren spoke. You could do that anywhere the arrays can focus. Yes. And the arrays can reorient? Yes. And you are building more. Chen did not answer immediately. Then she said, yes. Kell arose. This is coercion, he said. You are holding the entire Concord hostage, Chen finally sat. No, she said quietly. We are making sure no one ever tries to remove us again. Lyrian studied her. You could have destroyed the Dominion fleet. Chen looked at her directly. That would have made us an enemy. A pause. Instead, we showed everyone what war with us would cost. Talvor leaned forward. Why build it at all? He asked. The Concord granted sanctuary. No one voted to remove humanity. Chen's expression changed. Not anger. Not fear. Something older. Because, she said, we studied your history. He rotated the projection. The Orion arm lit up with historical conflict markers, trade wars, sanctioned blockades, transit priority disputes, economic exclusion events, systems starved of access rather than attack directly. You don't conquer worlds, Chen said. You isolate them. Silence spread across the chamber. You offered sanctuary, she continued. And we're grateful. But sanctuary is policy. Policy changes. She met Talvor's gaze. We needed something that wouldn't. There was a long pause before Lyrian asked the next question. What are you building now? Chen hesitated. Then she activated the inner system projection. The new structure came into focus. A ring. Not around Earth. Around the sun. Incomplete. But massive thousands of kilometers of segmented collectors and field emitters slowly linking together. Kel's voice dropped. That is not energy collection. Oh, Chen agreed. Oren's eyes narrowed. It's alignment infrastructure. Chen nodded once. For what? Talvor asked. Chen didn't answer immediately. When she did, her voice was very calm. The mirrors are insurance, she said. Pause. The ring is deterrence. The calculations arrived on Reth's console before Chen explained. He ran them once, then again. Then a third time. Oh, he whispered. Talvor turned toward him. What does it do? Reth swallowed. If completed, he said, the ring could synchronize solar output into a coherent emission window. Kel blinked. You mean a flare? Reth shook his head. No, he zoomed the projection outward. The focal vectors extended beyond the system, beyond the nearest transit hub, beyond local space entirely. If fully aligned, Reth said quietly, they could project a stellar-scale energy burst along a fixed interstellar vector. The chamber went very still. That's not deterrence, Kel said. That's extinction. Chen spoke before anyone else could. It's range limited, she said. Line of sight only. Alignment takes months. It cannot be retargeted quickly. Oren's voice was low, but if someone tried to remove Sol, Chen held his gaze. They wouldn't lose a fleet, a breath. They'd lose a star. The room remained silent for a long time. Finally, Lyrian asked the only question that mattered. Would you use it? Chen didn't answer right away. When she did, her voice carried no triumph, no pride, only weight. If someone tried to erase humanity, she said, we would make sure the cost was remembered. Another pause. By everyone. That night, in a private channel, Talvor spoke to Lyrian. They built this before the Dominion incident. He said, yes. They never trusted the sanctuary. Oh, Talvor stared at the Sol projection. They didn't choose war. Lyrian shook her head slowly. No, she said, they chose to make war impossible, far beyond Pluto. The mirror arrays continued their silent rotation, closer to the sun. The ring segments locked together one by one, and across the Orion arm, a new calculation began to spread through every government, every military command, every economic council. Humanity could not win a war. But if threatened, they could decide how many stars went dark with them. The crisis that forced the decision did not begin in Sol. It began 300 light-years away, and it began, as most galactic disasters did, with a miscalculation. The Helier Combine was not a military power. They were energy traders. For 5 centuries, the Combine had operated stellar extraction platforms, vast orbital arrays that skimmed solar plasma and converted it into high-density transport fuel for hyperspace fleets. Their business model depended on stability, predictable stars, predictable routes, predictable markets. When the Sol system demonstrated the ability to focus stellar output, The Combine's analysts saw something the military blocs did not: competition. If humanity completed their solar ring, they would possess the most efficient energy projection and harvesting system in the Orion arm. They could flood the market, undercut pricing, collapse the Combine's core revenue streams. Within 8 days of the Sol demonstration, Combine economic forecasts showed a worst-case scenario: sector-wide price destabilization within 12 years. For the Combine, 12 years was not long-term risk, it was an existential timeline. Their board authorized a response: not military, economic containment. The strategy was elegant. The Combine controlled fuel distribution contracts across 6 major transit corridors. They began quietly adjusting supply allocations, increasing costs for routes that pass near Sol, while offering deep discounts for alternatives that bypass the system entirely. Within weeks, shipping companies began rerouting traffic, then long-haul logistics firms, then trade consortiums. Sol's projected integration into Concord commerce began to stall. Sanctuary worlds allocated for human resettlement suddenly reported transport delays. Equipment shipments slowed. Medical supply chains lengthened. Population transfers missed windows. No war, no sanctions, just isolation pressure. The method was familiar. Director Maya Chen recognized it immediately. "They're testing whether we can survive economic suffocation," she told the Emergency Council on Earth. Ambassador Ruiz spoke quietly. "Can we?" Chen didn't answer right away. Not indefinitely. The Concord noticed the pattern within 2 months, but the Combine had broken no treaty, no law, no formal agreement. They were simply adjusting prices. Trade Minister Kell addressed the High Council with visible frustration. "We cannot compel private energy markets," he said. "The Combine operates within legal parameters." Oren spoke from the defense chamber. "This is coercion." Kell spread his hands. "So is economics." The effects on Sol worsened. Construction timelines for the solar ring slipped. Mirror array expansion slowed. Most critically, evacuation schedules began to fail. Millions of civilians waited for transport capacity that no longer arrived. On Earth, the public response was not panic. It was anger. Then something else. Mobilization. Civilian manufacturing surged again. Local transport infrastructure expanded. Orbital shipyards began producing small, inefficient transfer craft using outdated propulsion systems. Slow, crude, but independent. Chen watched the production numbers rise. "They're preparing for a siege," Ruiz said. Chen nodded. "We've always been good at that." 3 months into the economic pressure campaign, the Helier Combine made their second move. They announced a new long-term energy stabilization treaty for the Orion arm. Membership guaranteed fuel priority access and price protection. All major powers were invited. One system was not: Sol. The message was clear: join the market structure, accept regulatory oversight, or operate alone. The High Council expected humanity to negotiate. Instead, Director Chen requested a full session address. For the first time since first contact, a human would speak directly to the entire Concord Assembly. The chamber filled, representatives from 17 species, economic blocs, military observers, even Dominion delegates attended. Chen appeared without ceremony. No diplomatic framing, no prepared introductions. She began immediately. "For 82 years, she said, humanity has been studied as a developing civilization." The projection behind her showed Earth's early industrial era: conflict, pollution, fragmentation. "You classified us as violent," she continued. The image shifted. Wars, economic crashes, political instability. "You classified us as inefficient. Factories, manual labor, redundant systems. You classified us as slow." The projection changed again. The interstellar relay network, the mirror arrays, the solar ring. Chen looked directly at the council. "All of those assessments were correct." A pause. "But you misunderstood something important." She changed the projection. "A single human city during crisis. Flood barriers, Emergency shelters, supply lines built overnight. Volunteers moving through the streets. When our systems fail, Chen said, we don't collapse. The image shifted again. War zones becoming manufacturing centers, civilian networks reorganizing into logistics chains. Entire economies restructured in months. We adapt under pressure, other pause, and we remember who applied it. Kella leaned forward. Director, he said, what is your point? Chen met his gaze. You think economic isolation will make us negotiate? A breath, it won't. The projection shifted one final time. The solar realm nearly complete. And you think the ring is a weapon? Silence filled the chamber. Isn't. Chen's voice dropped slightly. It's a power plant. The data followed. If fully operational, the ring could harvest and redirect enough solar output to generate energy equivalent to 3 major combine extraction networks: sustainable, continuous, local. No external supply required. Kell's eyes widened. You're going to leave the fuel market? Chen nodded. We're going to leave dependence. A minion observer spoke from the back of the chamber. And if the combine responds with full embargo? Chen didn't hesitate. We finish the ring. Another pause. And then we offer energy at half their price. The chamber erupted into overlapping voices. Trade disruption models began cascading across the network. If humanity entered the energy market independently, the combine wouldn't lose 12-year projections. They'd lose everything. The combine responded within hours. Emergency board session. Crisis projections. Containment strategies. Then a decision. Sol completed the ring. Market leverage would be permanently lost. So the ring had to be stopped. Quietly. Plausibly, before activation. The attack fleet was small. Not warships. Industrial vessels. Mining carriers. Salvage platforms. All legally civilian. All heavily reinforced. They entered Sol under a standard resource transit declaration. Then changed course. Directly toward the solar ring construction zone. Their official transmission was simple. Unlicensed stellar manipulation infrastructure presents regional stability risk. Combined safety teams are authorized to dismantle hazardous structures. Back on Earth, Chen listened to the message without expression. They're going to take it apart piece by piece. Ruiz said, yes, we can't stop them militarily. Ruiz looked at her. Then what do we do? Chen stared at the solar output monitor. The ring was 91% complete. Mirror arrays. Operational. Alignment systems. Functional. Full synchronization had never been tested. Because the output would be extreme. Prepare full system broadcast, Chen said quietly. Across the Orion arm, emergency notifications appeared on every major network. Solar ring activation test Sol system. Maximum energy alignment event estimated duration. 180 seconds. The combine vessels did not withdraw. They assumed it was a bluff. They continued their approach. At 2:14 Sol time, the ring activated. From outside the system, it looked like the star had sharpened. Not brighter. More focused. Solar output across the visible spectrum narrowed into a coherent emission window. The mirror arrays shifted. The beam extended outward. Not toward a system. Not toward a fleet. Into empty space. But the power levels registered across the Concord monitoring network caused immediate alarm. Reth's voice shook as the numbers finalized. That's not a flare. Tal Vor whispered. How much energy? Reth swallowed. For 3 minutes, he said. Sol is the brightest directed source in the Orion arm. Inside the system, the combine vessels experienced the effect first. Thermal load spiked. Shielding systems overloaded. External hull layers began to vaporize under reflected scatter. They fled. Not because they were attacked. Because they suddenly understood something. If the beam had been pointed at them, there would have been nothing left to flee. The emission ended after exactly 180 seconds. The star returned to normal output. The ring powered down. Across the Orion arm, the message was received. Humanity did not just have infrastructure deterrence. They had stellar-scale energy control. Not a weapon, but a capability, and capability, in galactic politics, was everything. Director Chen transmitted one final statement. This was a calibration test, she said. Pause. The next activation will be commercial. Another pause. If the Combine prefers competition to cooperation, within 12 hours, the Helier Combine announced a new fuel distribution agreement. Sol system included. Priority access guaranteed. No dismantling teams were ever mentioned again. In the Concorde chamber, no one spoke for a long time. Finally, Oren said quietly, "They didn't threaten anyone." Kel nodded slowly. "They just proved they don't need anyone." Across the stars, shipping lanes resumed, fuel prices stabilized, and for the first time since the Sanctuary request, humanity was no longer being pressured to survive. They were being courted, but far beyond the economic networks, in deep observation space, something else had noticed the solar event, something outside the Concorde, something old, something that measured civilizations by their energy signatures. And for the first time in millions of years, Sol had crossed its detection threshold. The first sign was not a ship, it was an absence. Deep beyond the Concorde's mapped frontier, in a region classified only as low-relevance void, a long-range observatory relay stopped transmitting. No distress signal, no system failure report, just silence. At first, it was dismissed as equipment loss. Remote stations failed all the time: micrometeor strikes, power degradation, random radiation events. Then a second relay went dark, then a third, all along a narrow vector, all pointing toward the Orion arm, toward Sol. The anomaly reached the Concorde Strategic Monitoring Network 6 days after the solar calibration event. Analyst Reth stared at the trajectory model in disbelief. "That path is too straight," he said. Talvor leaned forward. "What is it?" Reth expanded the sensor data. Gravitational distortions, minimal, perfectly consistent, moving at a velocity just below standard hyperspace threshold, but without entering hyperspace. No transition signatures, no wake turbulence, no detectable propulsion. "It's crossing interstellar space." "Directly," Reth said. Oren's voice lowered. "At that speed?" Reth nodded. "It will reach the outer Orion boundary in 87 days. Silence settled across the chamber. "Origin?" Talvor asked. Reth hesitated. "Unknown." The signal appeared 51 days later. The echo revealed structure, enormous structure, thousands of kilometers long, symmetrical, layered, not a fleet, a single construct. When the data reached the High Council, no one spoke for several seconds. Then Oren asked the only question that mattered. "Is it a weapon?" Reth ran the analysis again, then again. Finally, he shook his head. "No," he said quietly. Pause. "It's a harvester." The Concorde's historical archives contain only fragmented references, ancient probe records, extinct civilizations, unfinished research, a classification rarely used. Type Omega Resource Entity, an autonomous system designed to locate high-energy civilizations and convert them, not conquer, not destroy, to convert. Stars, planets, infrastructure, all processed into raw energy storage and matter compression. Civilizations were not enemies, they were fuel sources. The trajectory update confirmed the target within hours. The construct was not moving toward the Orion Trade Corps, toward the Dominion, not toward the Combine. It was moving toward the brightest recent energy signature in the region. Sol, emergency session. Full council. All blocks present. This time, there was no debate about jurisdiction. This entity has consumed 3 recorded civilizations in the outer archives, Reth reported, each detected after crossing high-energy thresholds. Kel's voice was tight. "Can we stop it?" Oren answered immediately. "No fleet in the Concorde can match its mass." "Can we negotiate?" "No evidence of communication capability." Talvor looked at the projection. "How long?" 34 days to Sol boundary. The chamber went silent, because everyone understood the implication. Humanity had made itself visible, and something had answered. The emergency delegation arrived at Sol within 12 hours. This time, there was no diplomatic formality, Director Chen met them in the operations center beneath Horizon Gate. She had already seen the data. "You've activated full system readiness," Oren observed. "Yes." "Evacuation?" Chen shook her head. "We don't have time to move everyone." The projection showed the incoming construct. It dwarfed anything humanity or the Concorde had ever built. "Can your solar system weapon engage it?" Kala asked. Chen didn't correct the word this time. "Yes." "Will it be enough?" Chen paused. "No." The strategic discussion lasted 9 hours. Fleet interception, impossible. Economic leverage, meaningless. Evacuation, partial at best. The entity would reach Sol. It would begin harvesting. And once it began, its mass would increase exponentially. Then it would move on. The Concorde, the Orionar, everything. Finally, Talvor asked the question no one wanted to ask. "Director Chen," he said quietly, "what is the maximum output of the solar alignment system?" Chen looked at him. "Full spectrum discharge?" she asked. "Yes." She hesitated. "If we push the ring beyond thermal tolerance," she said slowly, "we can produce a single emission event at approximately 9 times the calibration output." Kel leaned forward. "That could destroy it." Chen didn't answer. Oren understood first. "What happens to Sol?" he asked. Chen met his gaze. "The star destabilizes." Silence. "How long?" Talvor asked. Chen's voice dropped. "Months, maybe years." Another pause. "But Earth becomes uninhabitable within weeks." No one spoke for a long time, because the equation was simple. Destroy the harvester, lose the solar system, or do nothing, and lose everything else. Ambassador Ruiz entered the room quietly. She had been listening. "How many people can the sanctuary worlds take?" she asked. Kel checked the projections. "With emergency authorization, 80%. Ruiz nodded. "And the rest?" No one answered. The decision was not made immediately. Humanity debated. Not governments. Not councils. The entire species. Global networks opened. Data released. Consequences explained. For 12 hours, the planet argued. Then the vote closed. Director Chen returned to the Concorde channel. "We're proceeding with full discharge," she said. Kel stared. "You're sacrificing your world." Chen shook her head. "No." She looked at the projection of the incoming construct. "We're protecting everyone else's." The evacuation began immediately. Transport capacity surged. Concorde fleets arrived without negotiation. Dominion carriers, combined logistics vessels, species that had feared humanity now worked around the clock to move them. Because for the first time, humanity was not holding the economy hostage. They were holding the line. The harvester crossed the Sol boundary on schedule. It did not change course. It did not accelerate. It simply continued inward, toward the star, toward the energy source, toward the signal it had detected. The solar ring reached full alignment as the construct entered the inner system. Mirror arrays locked. Thermal tolerances exceeded. Structural alarms triggered across every segment. Chen watched the numbers climb. Evacuation status? 79% complete. Good enough. She opened a system-wide channel. "This is Director Chen. Final alignment beginning." She paused, then added, "Tell the sanctuary worlds we're coming home." Across the Orion arm, every monitoring station locked onto Sol. The star brightened, then sharpened, then focused. The emission vector aligned directly with the incoming construct. For 6 seconds, nothing happened. Then the harvester's outer layers began to vaporize. Not burn, not explode, just disappear. The beam intensified. Structural collapse cascaded inward. Energy storage nodes overloaded. Containment fields failed. For seconds, Sol poured everything it had into the target. Then the ring began to fail. Segments warped. Connections snapped. Mirror arrays drifted out of alignment. The beam scattered. The emission collapsed. The star returned to normal output. Across the monitoring networks, the harvester's mass reading dropped to 0. It was gone. 3 weeks later, Solar instability began, radiation spikes, magnetic irregularities, orbital conditions deteriorating, evacuation accelerated again. This time, the last 20% left, cities powered down, stations abandoned, Earth went quiet. 2 years later, the Sol system was classified as hazard zone stellar instability pending. Humanity no longer lived there. They lived across 3 sanctuary worlds, then 5, then 12. They rebuilt. Faster than expected, more coordinated than before, more unified. In the High Council archives, Tal Vor recorded the final assessment. Humanity requested sanctuary, he said. They were offered protection. Pause. They chose responsibility instead. Another pause. They did not threaten the galaxy. He looked at the empty projection of Sol. They proved they were willing to pay the cost of saving it. Centuries later, a new Concord Doctrine was written. It did not classify humanity as primitive, or dangerous, or strategic. It used a different term. Species-level deterrent civilization definition. A civilization that cannot be controlled by force, coercion, or isolation, because it is willing to sacrifice itself to protect the whole. And in the deep archives, one final note remained attached to the Sol incident, not written by the Concord, written by a Dominion commander who had once tried to pressure a small, desperate world. If humanity ever asks for sanctuary again, the note read, give it to them immediately. Pause. Because if they start building insurance, another pause. It's already too late. Far beyond the former orbit of Pluto, a damaged mirror array still drifted, cold, silent, and slowly, over centuries, other civilizations began to study it, not to copy the weapon, but to understand the lesson. Because the galaxy had offered humanity safety, and when safety failed, humanity had chosen something far more dangerous. Not conquest, not revenge, not dominance. They had chosen responsibility. And that, the galaxy finally understood, was the most terrifying power of all.